Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
Welcome to the Carol the Coach Show. Hi. If you need some strength, you need some hope, and you need some recovery, you are in the right place. You know that it is my goal in life to help you get to recovery and maintain that so you can live your best life ever. And I'm just very pleased that I have been getting so many calls and emails asking me about resources available. That's what this show is all about. It is about finding the experts who can get you the most recovery in the fastest of ways. Now, I got to tell you, I say fast, but let's face it, if you've done any of your bibliotherapy, you know that sexual addiction takes about 3 to 5 years to recover. And so this is not a fast process, and yet it is a very hopeful process. When you work the recovery tools, they work for you. And so that's what we teach about. We talk about recovery. If you're listening to the show for the first time tonight, welcome. We are glad that you found us. You probably went to iTunes and put in sexual addiction and found out that we are the only show right now that talks exclusively about sexual addiction. And certainly I've made it my mission. You know I'm a CSAT. I'm a certified sexual addiction therapist. And I want to disseminate information that is going to take your life to the next level. And, you know, one of the things I learned from the great Dr. Patrick Carnes is that initially you're struggling with this illness and you want to get better and you do whatever it takes. That second part is that you practice those tools religiously. It takes a committee to assist you in recovering from addiction. And that third part of the recovery process is coaching. It is living a legacy. It's about giving back. And you know, no matter where you are in this process, I promise to you is with spiritual transformation and those 12 steps, you will be able to give back to your friends, to other people in the fellowship, and you'll go from shame to feeling really good. And can you imagine living a life without shame? I mean, that's absolutely amazing. You know, one thing I know for sure is that we were meant to help each other out. When I do the show, that's why it's 9 o'clock on a Monday night. Here I am with you after a 12-hour day, ending with my sex addicts group from 5 to 6:30, coming home, eating something quick, and then getting ready for the show. It is my belief that when you pay it forward, you end up reaping lots of rewards. It boosts your self-esteem. It gives you those feel-good hormones like dopamine. And you're making a difference in the world, and that's what we're all about. So I want to welcome you to the show, whether you're a regular listener or this is your first time. You are at the right place. Tonight's a little bit different. I have to say, in my 2.5 years of doing this show, I have only interviewed a couple of different people that talked about something other than sexual addiction. And tonight we have Thomas Gagliano, who wrote a book. If you've downloaded the shows and listened to them all, a couple of years ago he wrote this book called The Problem Was Me. And it really was a book that had recovery tools because it says, hey, we can't change anybody else. We can't change anything else. All we really can change is ourselves. And so as a result of that, one of the things that I really admired about Thomas is that he is helping people to be accountable for their own behavior. And that book is an excellent book. We've interviewed him. You can go back through the archives and put in The Problem Was Me, and it'll pull up exactly when we recorded him, and you can listen to that show. Right now, he has decided to do a show on parenting. Thomas had a really tough childhood with parents that weren't particularly encouraging, and he really believes that there's not enough help for parenting, and he understands the sexual addiction world, and so he wanted to be on the show so he could talk about his new book. Now, you know that when we're talking sexual addiction, we talk about anything, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, there will be things that possibly are offensive. Well, he's got this catchy title that might be offensive. It's Don't Put Your Crap in Your Baby's Diaper. And so I really encourage you, if you're struggling with parenting, especially around addiction, you know, there's no doubt that when you're working on a sexual addiction, you are clearly working on your recovery first and foremost. And you're working on your relationship with your wife or husband and the kids. And so it can be very tough to juggle parenting any old way, let alone when you're struggling with an addiction. So Don't Put Your Crap in Your Child's Diaper is an amazing book on how to parent, and it encourages you to encourage your child, and that's so important. You know, families today are met with so many challenges, and I'll be the first to admit that it's not just around sexual addiction. It's also around time management and priorities and all the electronic entertainment that occurs and has affected your life as a sex addict and your child's life. We're seeing more and more and more and more gaming addiction, video gaming addiction. We're seeing kids, you know, by the time they're 11, they've seen 20 hours of porn. That's been researched. And so Thomas is going to talk about, you know, how do you work with that? How do you get around it? How do you educate your kids? As well as, you know, what do you need to do to make a difference in the lives of your kids? Why is it important to stay curious with your children as opposed to lecture them? What are the long-term effects when parents overindulge their kids? So I hope if you have kids, you'll listen to the show, know that we're going to tie it in to sexual addiction tonight. And we want to celebrate your victories just in the same way that we want to celebrate your children. So stay tuned for Thomas Gagliano. He's an amazing author, and he has done this book, Don't Put Your Crap in Your Child's Diaper. It's all about parenting, and it's about sexual addiction. We're going to be looking at both of those issues. Now, you know I'm straight up, honest, and forward, and I say it like I see it. And tonight, I want to ask you, do you have uncontrollable rage? Are you somebody who rages at your family, at your coworkers, at your friends, at your kids? Have you ever looked at your rage and wondered if it could be considered eroticized rage? If you've read any Patrick Carnes material, you know that he believes that there's two types of eroticized rage. One is the eroticized rage that happens if you've experienced a trauma as a child. And you reenact that trauma as an adult in perhaps a separate way. You know, if you were voyeured as a child, if somebody molested you, it's obviously affected you. And what we find is that more oftentimes than not, somebody who's been through that experience, if they are intrigued by pornography, they oftentimes are the most intrigued with child porn because they were offended as a young child, or in pornography that simulates what they went through as a child. You know, and so that's called eroticized rage. It's when a child grows up to feel angry about being victimized, and then as a result, they reenact the trauma by learning how to be interested in that same thing as an adult. Very complicated, very psychological, it oftentimes can happen. The other way that we see eroticized rage show up is when a client in their sexual addiction participates in behaviors that are not kind, they're actually exploitive, they're forceful, maybe they're intrusive. You've heard me talk about frauderism before. That's when somebody rubs up against somebody without their consent. You've seen people that have voyeured by using webcams and cameras and putting them in places to be able to voyeur, knowing that it's intrusive. Nobody is aware of that kind of activity. That in itself can be very, very angry. And when you've got anger like that, it can motivate you to do behaviors, to participate in actions you really don't want to participate in. It's almost as if you have this unconscious need to very clearly manifest some of the same behaviors that occurred to you. Oh, do you hear my dog here? I'm going to have to put him on the floor. There we go. So, my question to you is, eroticized rage is something that, once you identify, can be managed. You need a person in your life who understands this technicality. And so I would ask you, if you feel like you have some rage that is uncontrollable, or in some ways it duplicates what you went through as a kid, you need to work with a certified sexual addictions therapist. And I would encourage you to go to sexhelp.com, look for the Find a Therapist label, put in your zip code, your country, and see who comes up within a 200, 100, or 50-mile radius. Unfortunately, most of your therapists don't know how to deal with this, so you really do need a specialist. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be talking about tonight, later on, after we get done talking with Thomas Gagliano. Again, author, speaker, has written a couple of books, and we're real excited to be hearing about, how do you balance recovery from sexual addiction with good parenting. All right. So I am going to put him on the phone, and we're going to find out how he's been doing. Tom, how are you?
Very well. Thank you, Carol. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was excited to see that you had written a second book.
Yeah.
You got to tell me, what was the impetus for you writing it?
You know, my first book, which was The Problem Was Me, which, by the way, I'm happy to say hit the bestseller list on Amazon, was really about my addictions and how I help people as a sponsor and individually silence the negative self-talk. So I started to get on the radio talking about this stuff, and it just seemed that everybody was pushing me towards parenting, childhood messaging. Because, Carol, I do believe that childhood messages influence every part of our lives, to the intimacy we have, to our parenting skills, the careers we choose, the roles we play. And it just pushed me that way. And I started really early on, though, to follow parents, recovering parents that had what I wanted. They seemed, and I've been in recovery for many years, and those that seem to develop a healthy child. And what's a healthy child? To me, that's somebody that grows up that has good coping mechanisms. They learn that when we have conflict, we need resolutions. They're children that grow to be an adult that could face the world with integrity and self-esteem in a productive way. But they know that when they need mom and dad are there for them. And I just started to talk to a lot of these parents, and I started to put this book together. Again, my experiences with my 4 kids as well, being a recovering addict, what I've learned over the last few years on what is essential to stop that addictive, and I call it bullying mentality, from occurring in your own home, what I did. And, Carol, I want to say, first of all, parenting's the toughest job in the world. I'm not making light of this. I mean, I've made mistakes. I've slipped at times. I've done these things. But I really wanted to create something that can help parents, recognize what areas of their parenting skills are strong and what areas need a little tweaking. What is the emotional baggage that we put in that kid's diaper? And that's why I came up with the name, Don't Put Your Crap in Your Kid's Diaper. So there you go.
I love that. Now, when did this book come out on Amazon?
This last book just came out about 3 weeks ago.
That's what I thought. And how's the response been?
So far, it's been pretty good. To be quite honest, you can always get my clients, my friends, to put a nice review on Amazon. Of course, they're going to do that. But I started to get some reviews from people I didn't know, and that means a lot to me. That means, people are out there saying, you know what, I wish I would have known this when I was a young parent, and you need young parents who need to get this book. And that's what I wanted to do, kind of give our kids the very best of what we have. But, we all have those areas in our lives where we got to distinguish between real fears, manufactured fears, healthy fears, and fears that are going to, prohibit our children from, reaching their full potential. Expectations. All parents do this. We put our expectations into children at such a young age, and I see on a ball field what happens to some kids. They have to live their lives out to please their parents, and they lose themselves. They lose their sense of value. So this is some of the things I really wanted to bring to the attention of parents.
Absolutely, and I know that it really helps when people who develop expertise have formulas, or they believe that certain things are more important than others. And in your opinion, what do you believe is the number one priority in parenting?
Absolutely. The number one thing is we all as parents have to create a safe environment for our children where they could share their feelings, tell us their fears, their sexual orientation if it need be, their curiosity with drugs. If a child does not have someone safe to share their feelings with at home, they will develop negative core beliefs. They'll tell themselves, if I can't share this with mom and dad, what's the matter with me? Something's wrong with me. We start that road of negative core beliefs, which will eventually lead up to intrusive inner voices, negative self-talk, and when that child gets old enough and those handcuffs are off, if you will, when they're able to drive and get around, that's when the acting out behaviors really start. That's when you see the addictions. That's when you see the bullying, domestic violence, or they act in with depression, isolation, cutting. That's what happens. But all of that stuff, that's all symptoms. This occurs early on when there's negative core beliefs. So parents, create a safe place so your children could share their feelings. Do you want your children to share their feelings with you, or do you want them to solicit advice from the wrong people? That's what I ask parents.
So basically, one of the things that you're really saying is that a number one priority is setting the stage for that safe place so that that child can talk about anything.
That's right. Feelings are not facts. Feelings are feelings. The parent needs to set the rules. They set the tone for the family. I'm not talking about rules now. There's plenty of time to give healthy consequences based on the child's decision. If you make a bad decision, you don't clean your room, you don't get your allowance. Consequences have to be based on the decision you make, not you're a bad kid and you deserve to be punished. So the parents make the rules. But a child needs to know, I can tell my parents anything I feel, and I'm not going to get judged. I'm not going to be told I'm doing something wrong. And I tell parents all the time, we're well aware of the verbal messages, but what about the parents out there that don't give the nonverbal messages, that look from mom, that disappointing look from dad? Those things are huge, powerful, and can scar a child. So again, you need to be able to create that safe place. You keep your rules in order, but a child needs to talk to you, or eventually they may find the wrong people to talk to.
Absolutely. That is such a good point. Now, you brought up consequences, and obviously I'm a big person about when parents come into my office, especially recovering parents. They come in with so much guilt. They feel like they've missed so much of their child's life with the selfishness of addiction. It's just they go hand in hand. Addicts are selfish, and they have to be to maintain their addiction. So then when they get into recovery, they just want to do everything so right. And I'm a big believer in consequences, but what I really hear you saying is that it's important for your child to feel safety. And, one of the things that I talk about with all my clients, no matter what their age, I say there are 3 things that you need to establish. You need to establish with your husband, wife, or kids: safety, connection, and trust. And that's what I hear you talking about, Tom, is really working hard to develop that with your kids.
Yeah, and I see it. You made a great point. I see a lot of parents overindulge their children because they feel guilty. Because it's not just addiction. Parents that work all the time, feeling they're not home a lot, so they overindulge people. And this is what I tell parents. If you're teaching your children not to share their feelings and not to talk about their feelings, if they're sad, they go play a video game or they go watch whatever kids do today, why don't you give them a bottle of scotch? It's the same thing. You're teaching your child to, instead of talking about their feelings, to medicate their feelings. Overindulging kids is one of the worst things you can do for your child. And I think a lot of times, as you said, some parents, they feel guilty. They feel like they and I can relate to this because, early on, my oldest probably got the worst of my parenting skills. So we feel guilty, we overindulge, and then what we do also is we create a child that's not ready to face the world. We're creating a child that is not ready to deal with coping mechanism, consequences. And I tell parents, too, you have to let your child get out of their own messes sometimes. Don't jump in all the time. If they're in impending danger, of course you protect them. Of course you step in. But if a child doesn't learn coping mechanisms, when they get older, they're not going to know how to face the world. And guess what? Parents are going to be mad at the parent that kept jumping in and getting too involved and not letting them figure it out themselves.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. And that's why you don't believe that controlling your child's behavior brings any kind of lasting results.
No, and I'll give you a great example of that.
Right,
I don't believe that.
Example.
I think controlling our children's behavior is like putting a Band-Aid on a dam. I think what we have to do as parents is supply our children with the tools to control their own behavior. Get them to make the healthy decisions on their own, not twisting their arm. When a child develops healthy habits, and how do you develop healthy habits? Well, you develop the safe environment, as I spoke about first. You give healthy consequences, not with the message you're a bad kid and you deserve to be punished, but the message that you made a bad choice and you need consequences for those choices. You teach children boundaries, and parents need to consistently enforce those boundaries, and then the child will develop healthy habits and make their own decisions. And I had a situation with my 15-year-old just in the beginning of last year, and he came to me and he said, "Hey, Dad, a couple of my friends smoke weed." He says, they tell me it makes you feel great. I'm curious. Now, Carol is a recovering addict. Could you imagine what I was thinking at that time?
You had to be scared to death.
Scared. What did I want to do? I wanted to control him. I wanted to tell him, go in your room, don't come out until you're 27. One of those things, don't hang out with those kids, meet other friends. Here's what I did, and this is what I teach parents to do. I stopped and I said, tell me what you know about weed. Tell me what you know about addiction. Let's talk about it. And he said, well, Dad, I know addiction can really hurt people because he knows I'm an addict. He knows a little bit about addiction, and I validated what he said. I said, yeah. I said, I know. I said, people that are addicted think they're in control of their addiction. The reality is the addiction's in control of them. And I said, also when you choose to do something and break the law, you've also made the choice of possibly getting arrested. You've got to be aware of that. I said, let's go on the Internet. So we went on the Internet. We looked up weed. There was an American epidemic.com. It was a CD that I saw that I bought, and I met the guy too, talking about weed and heroin and how one leads to the other. So we saw this tape together. Well, here's the great part of the story. I was curious with him. I came back to him a few weeks later. I said, hey, what's going on with your friends with the weed? He says, Dad, I decided not to hang out with them anymore. He made that decision, Carol. I could have grabbed his arm and twisted it and said, don't hang out with those kids. But because I was curious, we spoke about it. We had a conversation about it. I told him consequences. He was safe enough to even tell me about it to begin with. He ended up making that decision, not me. It's so much more powerful when your child makes that decision rather than you twisting their arm and making the healthy decision.
And that's what you're referencing when you say be curious. In the book, you talk about it's much more advantageous to be curious with your child and to do it in kind of a non-Columbo way. You're not getting all the facts. You're just trying to figure out what does your child think about the situation.
Absolutely. And, who is your child hanging out with, even who their parents are, and know what sites they're on. We have, I'm sure a big pornography epidemic today. We got kids that at 12 years old have viewed more pornography than some 50-year-olds. I mean, it's insane. You got kids coming home in 7th grade, unfiltered computers, looking at pornography. By the time they get to 12th grade, they've objectified people to the point that they don't even know what emotional intimacy is. Everything's hooking up and doing this and doing that. You need to know what sites they're on, get the computers filtered, know what they like to do, really get curious. And, I know there's a lot of single parents out there, and I'm not telling you to take a great deal of time every day, but use the quality time. Check in every day for a few minutes. Get curious. Get nosy. And even if your child doesn't like it, they're going to figure out someday that you did that because you cared. And that's huge. As addicts, we all lost the message early on that we were important to those above us, to our higher powers. And unfortunately, like for my situation, when my dad was out drinking and womanizing and doing all these things, at 10 years old, Carol, I never said, oh, gee, he suffers from a disease called addiction. Not at 10. At 10, I said, what's the matter with me? I must be damaged goods. I must be unlovable, or my dad would be hanging around with me. So the value we instill at our children at a very early age is going to carry their whole life, either in the positive way or in the negative way.
Yeah, that's a real good point. And, obviously remembering about The Problem Was Me, the book that you wrote, I remember that reunion you had with your father towards the end, and, he was a man that didn't give you a lot of encouragement or praise. And so what do you think, what do you think is most important to give to a child in regards to psychological self-esteem building?
Simple. Make them feel that they're valued. And we make them feel that they're valued by paying attention to them, by being curious with them, creating a safe place with them. I had the situation where my son again, he was pitching in a little league game, and he didn't pitch well. And I remember Carol saying to myself, what am I going to say to him after the game? I mean, he's going to be very upset. And should I put the therapist hat on and ask him his feelings? Should I put the pitching coach hat on and help him with his follow through? And I'll never forget it, Carol. I went to the dugout, and in front of his 12-year-old friends, he looked at me and he said, "Dad, I need a hug." And that's all he needed. He needed a hug from me. He didn't need the pitching coach. He didn't need a therapist. He didn't need all of that stuff. He needed what I would want from my father when I was really struggling as a kid. And what is that? That's a hug. You're going to be okay, and I love you. And those little things.
Like unconditional love. And, boy, your son must be pretty secure to ask for that in the middle of the field.
And it was funny because as I'm hugging him, I look at these 12-year-olds all looking at us, and I always said, Carol, I wonder what was going through their minds. Like, wow, that's when I make that big error in that big situation, or I throw that interception at the wrong time, what do I need from my dad? To be told that I threw it wrong, that I should have got my glove down enough, or do I need that hug? Do I need just to know that it's going to be okay, that he still loves me? And I think that is, you ask what's so important, that value that's instilled early on could last a lifetime.
Oh, I agree. And, I was wondering, because obviously that's a situation where somebody hasn't played their best and you don't know which hat to put on, but you've made a very good point that they really need that unconditional love. Now, let's talk about the parents who have found pornography on their child's computer, on their phone, and two things may have happened. One is they may be wondering, oh, my gosh, did my kid find my stash, and is this a result of my own addiction? Or they may think, oh, my gosh, my child is following in my footsteps.
Yeah.
What would you advise a parent to do there?
I think first, one of the things I tell parents is, as I talk about in my first book, is be mindful of the behaviors you're passing down to your children. It's very hard, Carol, for me to give my children what I don't possess inside. And if I'm keeping secrets, if I'm leading that fragmented life that addicts lead, because, again, that's what makes us addicts, fragmentation instead of being congruent.
Yeah.
And if I'm showing up as a healthy adult, I can give my child the modeling. But if I'm an adult child, it's very difficult for me to not pass down those messages to my child. So if I am a healthy adult, and what is a healthy adult? In my opinion, an emotional healthy adult is somebody that gives validation and empathy, somebody that shares their feelings, but also knows they have boundaries. I can talk to my child, and I've done this before. Listen, you may think that pornography you're viewing is just not that dangerous, but I could tell you from my perspective of addiction that I ended up hurting a lot of people before I realized that I couldn't stop. And I share, and again, this goes against the grain with what I learned when I got my master's of social work, and I know a lot of people may not agree with this, but I share a lot of my experience, strength, and hope with my children. I just tell them flat out, listen, addictions hurt your mom. I hurt your mom with the addictions. I hurt you with the addictions. So I never realized that it would ever get to that point. And I thought, too, a simple glass of wine or what's the big deal would never lead into what it led into. And I love you, and I don't want that to happen to you. So when I start to share from my heart, it really allows them to hear me. If I go in there with just a lecture, with just you need to stop, you can't watch pornography. If you watch pornography again, you're going to lose your this. Fine. You make the rules and the consequences, and you could make those stipulations. If you watch pornography again, then you lost your TV or you lost your computer. There's nothing wrong with that. But first, I'm going to share how powerful addiction is to the mind of somebody that I realize has no clue at that point.
Good point. So now I'm going to make it even tougher and just ask your opinion on this. I get asked this all the time, and I have some mixed feelings. I know what I end up saying. I'd love to hear what you say. And that is for the parents that come in and they're in recovery and they're doing a good job, and they find out that their kids are using drugs or alcohol, porn, chatting, in chat rooms, whatever. And they say, do I need to put something on my computer that actually logs the keystrokes and logs the conversations so that I know what's going on in my child's life, i.e., do I need to spy on my child? What would you tell them?
I would say it's part of it, yeah. You know, you need to protect your children from themselves sometimes and from the world. They may not be strong enough to deal with the dangers of the computer. And the bottom line is, as a parent, if you don't know what's going on, well, then you can't protect them. So I definitely think that that's part of the piece, but not the whole piece. I think, you know, you have to, again, along with that, create that environment that you can talk to your child, that safety, like, tell me what's going on with you. It's okay. I'm not going to yell and scream at you and tell you you're a bad person. I want to hear how you're feeling. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Now, again, when I say that, some parents right away, oh, you can't be a friend to your child. I'm not saying that. You make the rules. You make the consequences. You stick to those. I'm not saying no. But again, I will clearly state, if a child can't discuss their curiosity with drugs or their curiosity with these things, okay, there's a good shot they're going to act it out later on in life. So they need to be able to talk about this stuff as well as doing those other things that where you need to protect them from themselves. So in answer to your question, I think, yes, you do that, but I think that's only part of what a parent needs to do.
Well, and what I advise parents to say is that they are going to start doing that so that it's not a secret. You know, you say, I'm really worried about you, and I need to let you know that I am going to put covenant eyes on your phone so that I know when you're going to places that I think are dangerous because I've got to protect you. Just know that I'm doing that. And, of course, they can raise holy hell about it, but at the same time, it is a parent's responsibility to protect their kids, and in the same way as you don't let them play out in the street, also don't let them go into chat rooms where they're going to be exploited, lied to, and perhaps really...
Absolutely. You know, that's our job. We need to protect our children. And again, the computer is very dangerous, way too powerful for the child to handle by themselves. And that's definitely, but the communication, as you said, Carol, is so important because, you know, again, we need to be able to build that safety up with them so that they can talk to us. That's part of what parenting is too, as well as protection. It's creating a place where they can talk to you. So I think that takes that encompasses, you know, both.
I hope you're disseminating this information to schools because I got to tell you, Tom, the reason I got into this field, you know, it's a dark field. I was a life coach. I was helping people take their life to the next level. It was almost always good, and it was inspiring and motivational, and it was amazing. And then I started talking about sex to a lot of my clients before I ever thought about getting my CSAT. And what I realized was that clients were talking to the schools when their kids got in trouble, and they were saying, talk to this Carol the coach. And I was getting a lot of referrals from kids who were having oral sex on the bus with each other at the ages of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yep.
And as if that weren't a tough enough situation to handle, because here these kids are doing it on the bus in front of other kids, but the rest of the kids were taking video of it. And then, of course, passing it around virally, and it became an epidemic and certainly exposed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids to the act and to the personal experience between two kids that didn't even really know it was personal. And it just mushroomed. And so that was when I said, you know, I'm not equipped to really know and what to tell superintendents and principals. I need to get some training, and that's when I decided to get my CSAT training. I would like for you to disseminate this information to the schools so that you can help schools to figure out how to talk about some of this stuff with students.
Yeah. Well, it's great you said that. That's what I'm trying to. I've been doing much more speaking engagements, and I'm speaking in California next week. I spoke in Westchester 2 weeks ago, so I'm trying to get that out to youth groups and to parents and to do all of these things. And, because even with bullying, we talk about bullying all the time. And, what are bullies? Bullies are fragmented, like addicts are. They have no compassion for themselves. They beat themselves up. Therefore, they have no compassion for other people. They act out what their feelings are inside. They act anger out because they're angry at themselves, and they're fragmented. And, when I go to once in a while to a middle school and have a bullying situation, I sit the bully down with the victim of the bully, and I tell them, let's watch a movie. Let's watch a pretend movie. There's Joe bullying Tom. What do you think Joe is feeling when he's bullying Tom? What do you think Tom is feeling when Joe's bullying him? See, when I start to get, whether it's addicts or bullies, to talk about that inside, that fragmentation, that part of them that they don't want anybody to see or hear, all of a sudden it normalizes it a little bit where they don't feel like they're so unique and so bad and so terrible. And when I start to get even kids in middle school to start to talk about what their feelings are, what do you think Tom's feeling who's bullying Joe? What do you think Joe's feeling who's being bullied by Tom? Because many times bullies and victims are very similar. One's acting in their pain, the other's acting out their pain. Not all the time, I said sometimes, but when I get people to talk about those insides, that fragmentation, they become a little more congruent. And if they become more congruent, they realize that, a lot of their distrust for the world that they learned early on can get blown up. Maybe they could trust a little more. So that's, part of what I try to talk to when I talk to kids about bullying and kids that are victims to bullies.
That's interesting because we were just talking at the beginning of the show about trauma reenactment, and certainly a lot of bullies have had trauma in their own life and now are reenacting that to have that sense of control. And kids do need a sense of control, but we got to help them find safe ways of doing that.
Right.
I'm curious, being that you're an addict in recovery and obviously have made it your mission to help parents know what to do, because this is the hardest job in the world and it is so trial and error. And I always say, it's bad enough that it's trial and error. You find something that works and it doesn't necessarily work for the next kid or in the next developmental stage. It's always changing, so you have to kind of mix it up a little bit. You've got these principles that work at any age with any kind of kid, because it's about honesty and it's about being curious and it's about validating and it's about, celebrating children's victories. Do you feel like pornography has long-term effects for our youth today?
Oh, terrible. I think that's the addiction of the future. I think that's the one that's going to be it's someday where kids are going to do more and not realizing that it is an addiction. I think what it does is it dehumanizes our children to the point that, again, as they get older, they look at women and men just as objects. Will never know what emotional intimacy is, holding hands and hugging and nurturing, talking. Plus, you have added on to that, you got the texting and emailing. So to have a personal conversation with a kid is hard enough to begin with. I think that this is going to have a devastating effect on our youth. I really do. And I think that this is, in years to come, is going to be a tremendous problem. Like I said before, we got kids that are like in 7th grade, 6th grade, coming home and flipping on a computer that's not filtered. Could you imagine what that mind is going to be like, 6 years later by 12th grade? It's scary.
Well, it's just so interesting because pornography is so perverse, and I don't just mean the act of sex, but pornography is meant to create that need for more and more, and so it gets uglier and uglier, and obviously kids are very, very curious, and so we're imprinting in their brains by not filtering what they're seeing. We're allowing them to learn real perverse things, and of course they don't know what to do with it. And so it does affect intimacy. And we know that sexual addiction itself is an intimacy disorder, so it would make sense that, kids already are having trouble with intimacy because they aren't doing face-to-face communication, let alone seeing those kinds of things on their own computer or on their own phone. I mean, would you ever have thought, I think, Tom, how old are you?
I'm 57.
I was going to say, and I'm 59, and clearly, who would have ever thought that kids would have had access to porn in their own pockets? And yet kids 8, 9, 10, or 11 have phones with Internet capability, and it's just too much freedom, too much perversity out there for a child to handle. And females are as curious as the boys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's insane. And, kids today, you see how capable they are on computers, on phones. I mean, I still yell for my kids every time I have a problem trying to get through on the computer to where I need to get through to. Come here, help me. I can't get logged in and this and that. At a very young age, and younger, kids are able to navigate their phones and computers. I mean, way before their maturity level hits that pace, their physical ability to do that surpasses their maturity level as far as that goes. And it's a very scary thing. And it's not just the world of addiction. As I said before, it's the world of intimacy. It's the world of communication. It hits everything, absolutely everything. Again, if one of the other problems, Cal, that feeds into that is, you got more and more parents working all the time. You got mom working and dad working, and they're not doing that because they don't love their children. It's the opposite sometimes. They want to build for a home, a college, and all these things. But child's not seeing it like that. Early on, a child says one thing, why are my parents paying attention to me? They don't have the capabilities to say at an early age, gee, mom and dad are working their tail off because they're saving for me to go to college. So again, we don't sometimes realize, we look at our childhood through adult lenses, and through adult lenses, we have personal experiences we live through, maturity processes. We've grown in so many different ways since then. But I challenge parents. I don't believe anybody completely remembers what it's like to be 9 or 10 years old. We've had too many transitions since then. And I think, a lot of children, because parents are so busy running here and running there and working and doing all of these things, I think we're giving our children a message that they're just not important. They're not saying that. I don't think they know how to communicate that. But again, they're starting to develop those negative core beliefs that are going to have to be medicated or changed later on in life.
Oh, I agree. So now let's just talk about parenting in general for the last part of the show.
Sure.
You talk about how important it is to celebrate your children's victories. And obviously, brought up the instance where somebody wasn't doing so well, your son, and that he needed a hug. But what would you tell parents about celebrating their kids' victories?
It's you ask a question in the beginning about, what's so important for a child and that value, that worth. I tell parents, when your child does something that they're proud of, it may be so crazy for you, but for them, they're proud of it. Make a big deal out of that. Celebrate it. Buy them an ice cream, a slice of pizza. Make a big deal about that early on. It builds that self-esteem. I just caution them to be careful in how they present that. You don't want to say, I'm so proud of you, you got an A on this test, when the sibling is standing right near there. Maybe the sibling can't get an A on the test, no matter how hard they try. So I tell parents, be clear to celebrate effort. I'm so proud of you. You tried so hard when you took that test. So the sibling, look, all children can try their best, but not all children can get A's. And parents need to be very careful that, sibling rivalry is very, very powerful. At an early age, the parents are their gods. They're their first heroes. They want and if the parent, is saying things, my mother used to say something like, Johnny's the smart one, or, Tom's the good-looking one, or you don't know what that does to children early on. And then the parent wonders when they get older, why aren't they talking to each other? I mean, this is the little things. You have to be very careful when you're celebrating or validating one child. Think about how the other child is hearing that so that you don't create a sibling problem. But also, always remember, celebrate those victories. You know, your son or daughter tries very hard on a test and gets a C. Celebrate that. Celebrate that their effort was amazing. You're so proud of them.
You're speaking my language. You know, when you said that sometimes you get parents that are critical of some of your advice because they think maybe you're sharing too much as an adult. And the only time I have parents critical of my parenting advice is when I give them this example. I say exactly what you say. I say, you know, the one way to validate a child is to notice the effort, not the outcome. And if your child is capable of making a B, but they come home with a C spelling test, if you can say to your child, well, you know, I'm looking at this here, and I am really pleased that you worked on this 15 minutes last night. It shows that you did some investment in your work. And what that does psychologically is it makes the child want to work 20 or 25 minutes. Now, I'll get a parent who will say, are you kidding me? I am not going to say anything positive about a C when that child is able to make B work, and I'm certainly not going to notice the effort. He worked 15 minutes, but he could have worked a half hour right off the bat, and I'm not reinforcing bad behavior. And I say, you know, I know it feels like bad behavior, but we're looking at what will motivate your child to do better next time. And what will motivate them to do better next time is if they hear you as a parent noticing, again, the effort, not the outcome.
Right.
Absolutely. Sometimes they get it, and sometimes they don't. But it's difficult when parents have been taught, praise your kids, praise your kids, praise your kids, but what we know about praising a kid is by telling them that they're a good boy or a good girl, they learn only to like themselves based on their achievements and not on the amount of work they do or who they are in terms of their personality. So you are singing my praises in terms of what I really encourage people to do as parents. It is risky. It can feel scary. Yeah.
And, you know, again, instill healthy habits. Healthy habits do not mean you get A's. Healthy habits is when a child shows up in a consistent manner, in a healthy way, tries their best in all facets of their life. That, to me, is a successful child. Not the one that gets A's, but the one that has healthy habits and shows up in a healthy way in all aspects of their life. That's the child that's going to make healthy decisions. A's doesn't mean your child's not going to smoke pot and do heroin someday. But I'll tell you what, create healthy habits for your children, healthy habits where they make the right decision on their own. They know right from wrong, and they also know if they get stuck, mom and dad are always there to help them. Create that kind of child, and you're not going to have to worry about the pot and the heroin later on in life. You're really not. The grades are not going to make a difference. I mean, I don't know statistically, but I have a feeling there's a lot of A students out there that, not a lot, but there probably is a good amount of very good students out there that have addictions today. I don't see the correlation in that manner, but I do in healthy habits.
Absolutely, and we certainly know among sex addicts that you've got as many CEOs and people in high positions who have sexual addiction as we do, and people that have not really done very well by society's terms. So,
absolutely.
Let me just remind everybody that I'm
clients.
listening to Tom Gagliano, and he wrote a book called Don't Put Your Crap in Your Child's Diaper.
In your kid's diaper.
On Amazon, and it's a highly recommended book for parents that they don't necessarily need strategies for what to do when your child does A, B, and C, but they need principles that will really help them and to help them to be mindful of what's the best investment in your kid? And what I hear you saying, Tom, is that being honest, being true, noticing effort, being curious, opening up communication, not making a child feel bad about unhealthy decisions, but finding out more about the reasoning, are all helpful concepts to create a relationship between you and your child that will pay it forward in their decisions and choices for the future.
Yeah, and, just to make a little correction, the book is Don't Put Your Crap in Your Kid's Diaper.
In your kid's, not child's diaper.
Right,
okay.
Kids, but the subtitle is The Cleanup Course Could Last a Lifetime. And that's the piece also, again, to create healthy habits early on for your child through the means that we spoke about tonight is what's going to create a child that can show up in a healthy way, with integrity, with confidence. And again, it starts early on. That's the key to creating healthy habits. It's awareness. You need to have self-awareness to know what actions to take. And if you consistently maintain those actions with your child, you're going to create those healthy habits.
Well, Thomas Gagliano, I appreciate all your wisdom and your investment in recovering addicts and just in parents in general. I mean, it is the hardest job in the world. So I hope this is a bestseller just like your other book, The Problem Was Me.
Thank you so much.
Does that have a subtitle too?
The Problem Was Me. A subtitle is how to end negative self-talk and take your life to a new level. So similar to what you said earlier, but it's stopping the negative self-talk, because again, what recovery has taught me, what the 12 steps has taught me, that if I'm going to heal, I got to make my life a we process. I got to allow other healers into my life to help guide me along. And sometimes if you do this stuff alone, you could never really silence that negative self-talk. That's that warden I talk about in my first book that is always telling us that we're not good enough, that little voice inside our head. And that, again, comes from those negative core beliefs early on.
Thank you so much for all of your wisdom tonight, and continued success both in book writing, speaking, and obviously coaching and in the wise therapist you are. Again.
Thank you so much, Carol. A pleasure. Had a lot of fun. Thanks.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that was Tom Gagliano, and his book, again, get it at Amazon, is Don't Put Your Crap in Your Kid's Diaper. It's a frank and honest parenting manual to assist you in providing the best opportunities for your kids. And, in some ways, when I talk with my listeners every Monday night, I hope that you take what you like and leave the rest, and know that not to find formulas and advice that really fits for you. I really encourage you to take new risks and, as I say, stretch out of your comfort zone and try some new things, and try it just like a good meeting. You know how we ask you to go to 6 meetings before you give it the boot? I ask you to try a behavior for at least 30 days and kind of evaluate what worked and what didn't about that behavior. I would encourage you to get his book. And as I say at all times, fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. I'm going to be on vacation next week, so we're going to be replaying the show. But the following week, we will be back just as normal. So I want you to have a great week. Feel free to email me at carolthecoach@aol.com and go to my website, Sex Help with Carol the Coach. Know that you are the only person who really make your life different. So think tonight about one thing that you could do based on tonight's show that will have a ripple effect the rest of the week. Have a good one.